Quentin's got rid of all that star stuff he was so fond of, confessed Samuel L. Jackson in 1998 after Jackie Brown came out. When he started writing scripts, it was because he wanted to be a movie star like a lot of people do. Then, when he became Quentin Tarantino, the star movie maker, he wrote that. He bought into it for a while, had some fun with it, and now he's been burned. He's learned from it. He's grown. But Tarantino only grew because he failed. Jackie Brown came out a quarter of a century ago, a few years after his first real stinker, the anthology film 4 Rooms. It would have been called 5 Rooms, but Richard Linklater could sense a dumpster fire in the making. 4 Rooms was kindly described by Ian Nathan as a, quote, indulgent mess made on a whim, poorly thought out and rushed into cinemas in a fit of hubris. In its aftermath, Tarantino devoted himself to soul-searching, perhaps contemplation, who knows, some script doctoring Michael Bay's The Rock, that is documented, and a juicy role as inmate Jack Cavallo, starring opposite Jennifer Aniston and Penn Jillette in 1997 CD-ROM video game Steven Spielberg's director's chair.
Put the gun down, man! Put the gun down!
Yes, that is an actual thing that exists. You can even play it. Links below. Anyway, this hiatus pointed Tarantino in a new direction. Quote. Oh, you wanted me to read it? Okay. I wasn't trying to top Pulp Fiction with Jackie Brown. I wanted to go underneath it and make a more modest character study movie. And that he did. In Jackie Brown, there's a fancy crane shot when Sam Jackson dispatches Chris Tucker and the Brian De Palma-inspired split screen. But apart from that, it is a pretty stylistically sedate film. Oh, there's also a split diopter shot, but you blink and you'll miss it. As long as you blink for about 7.5 seconds. The film is also his least violent, the one with the most cross dissolves and probably his slowest. It exists outside his movie universe, Red Apples Be Damned, but from all the ways it distances itself from his counterparts, the most meaningful and the one that gets us closer to understanding why it's so different in the first place is the way its narrative is told chronologically. It's well documented that his first 2 films were praised for their non-linear architecture. Pulp Fiction's timeline was chaotic, with a diner robbery at both ends, and Reservoir Dogs is possibly even more chaotic. There's a diner scene before a robbery, but we don't see any robbery. Everyone's at the warehouse after the robbery that didn't happen, but then we see flashbacks, which Tarantino said aren't flashbacks but chapters in a novel. So should we trust him, especially since we find out in one of those flashbacks/chapters that he died before the film even happened? And where are these quote Reservoir Dogs and who let them out?
What was that?
Now, that's film number 1 and 2. In film number 3, the clock is the law. In Jackie Brown, time is linear, apart from one major set piece, the money swap scene at the Del Amo Mall. It starts out with 3 cars, one driven by Jackie of course, the second one by Louis Gara, mustachioed Robert De Niro in his best comedic role, and the third by Max Cherry, played by Robert Forster. First, we follow Jackie through the execution of her plan to grift the 2 sides of the law. She changes into a new suit at Billingsley, gives Melanie the decoy bag, fills the real bag with the money and leaves it for Max Cherry to pick up. The plan is A-OK. It worked. So why then is Tarantino showing us the same thing again, but from Louis' point of view and then from Max Cherry's? And here's where things get interesting. If we think about other occasions when Tarantino messed around with the chronology, there's usually a reason, and usually that reason is to affect our perception of the action. Say, would it affect you to think our hero is a wife killer? Kaisil Mohammed seems to think so. He argues that in his other films, the skewed narrative influences the interpretation we place upon the entire series of events that make up the story. And I agree. Take Minnie's haberdashery massacre scene. In the present time, we witness the castration by gunpowder of Major Marky Warren, before we hop onto the time machine to go back a few hours. In this chapter, we are reintroduced to our gang of characters as the Domergue gang.
Behind me, plucking that chicken is Gemma.
The dead chicken stands in for Hitchcock's bomb. You know,
4 people are sitting around a table, talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to smithereens. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table and will go off in 5 minutes. Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information that in 5 minutes' time that bomb will go off.
the same principle is at play here. About an hour before, we saw singer Bob working the same task, which means that Gemma never gets to pluck that chicken. So, if you stayed awake the whole time, you know that with every feather smiling Gemma plucks, we get that much closer to mayhem and carnage. As Mohammed said, skewing the narrative, aka playing with linearity, will influence interpretation. When Tarantino repeats the switch off in Jackie Brown, nothing changes, so that doesn't happen. It only emphasizes the differing experiences of the characters in their relation to a single event. And the viewer may well ask, why are we seeing the same thing not twice but thrice? The events depicted could just as easily have been edited into a conventionally cross-cut sequence, one that would look like this. The sequence edited this way doesn't deny the viewer any information, but the way Tarantino chose to present it is for a director like him sinfully unmotivated. And nothing Tarantino does seems to be unmotivated. Poorly motivated? Sure, but not unmotivated. Even his often discussed food fetish does, for the most part, fit within his motives, aka film narratives. In Inglourious Basterds, it's a major plot point. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, feet marked the difference between hippie, hippie hater, hippie-ish, and hippie at heart. Or in Jackie Brown's case, the ogling of Bridget Fonda's feet first awakes De Niro sexually, but most importantly, it lays the groundwork for us to identify straight away who these toe rings belong to. And in From Dusk Till Dawn, anyway, if everything's motivated, then why do these innocuous 9 minutes exist in Jackie Brown? All the gestures of exposition are there, all the conventions by which we have been trained as moviegoers to recognize the clever unfolding of pertinent details are in place, but the filmic device adds up to nothing. There's nothing there except for what's there. And that was wonderful. The scene and the film was a display of maturity and growth. Jackie Brown seemed to be pointing in a new direction altogether. More low-key, more contemplative. For some reason, Tarantino followed it up with Kill Bill, a literal doubling down on his cinematic universe of blood and guts, convoluted plots and red apples. Until Cliff Booth drove aimlessly through the streets of Los Angeles, I would be hard-pressed to find other meaningful passages in his work that did not exist in the service of plot. Don't get me wrong, Tarantino had an amazing career. He'll go down as one of the great American filmmakers. But if we indulge in a bit of cinema speculation, we can imagine an alternative universe where Tarantino followed the blueprint laid out by Jackie Brown, where he embraced the real world. Maybe he made a rom-com. Maybe instead of his take on the spaghetti western, he made a spaghetti neo-realist film. Who knows? What I know is that I would have loved to have seen those movies.